Hello, Lone Star 1870 here with my guide on how to climb in ranked. So a little bit about me. I am a mid main. I mostly play Zed and LeBlanc, and my secondary is Kha'Zix Jungle. I have been playing the game since Season 2, and I peaked Diamond 3 back in Season 4, but I stopped playing the game around then. Back in Season 9 last year, I started playing the game again, but I was hard stuck gold for over 600 games. Once I started really trying to focus on improving myself and my gameplay, I climbed easily to Diamond 4. It took me 75 games once I got Plat 4 to get Diamond 4, and I climbed with a 67% win rate. Climbing is not the easiest thing in the world. You really have to try to improve. I can't tell you some simple clickbait trick to climb. However, I can help you figure out what you need to do to improve, help you figure out your weaknesses, and once you figure out your weaknesses, it's up to you to improve and get better. But once you find the weaknesses, it's a lot easier to climb. I should also mention that this video is to show you the concepts you will need to work on to climb and how you can play more consistently. I will release more in-depth videos with examples showing you how to put these concepts into practice, but this video is not to show you examples and gameplay of how I improved. Here's a brief outline of the material I will cover in this video. First is you want to really dominate your lane almost every game. In order to climb, you really need to consistently play better than your counterpart. Second, you want to have better and faster rotations. You want to know whether or not you should rotate. You want to know whether or not you can anticipate a rotation will need to be made soon, etc. You will want to also get objectives. Objectives are what drive wins. Kills are great. CS leads are amazing, but really objectives, Dragons, Baron, and Season 10, that's what's really important. Fourth, side lane awareness. Who should go to the side lane? How far should you push up? How often should you group? Do you have teleport? Those sort of factors. Then some factors outside of the game as well. So stuff like dodging, your champ pool, etc. And then lastly, kind of a summary of the key tips I would really recommend that you really focus on in order to climb. As I stated in the previous slide, it is very important to dominate your lane almost every single game in order to climb very efficiently and quickly. One way to climb quickly is to create a lot of small advantages. Remember that small advantages lead into big advantages. If you can farm better consistently, if you can take better trades almost every time, if you can juke better than the enemy, if you can track their summoners, all of those in combination really add up, and you will be a lot stronger than the enemy mid and a lot more useful consistently. You also really need to understand trading patterns. You need to understand what kind of trades the champion you're playing wants, and you want to do that. You also want to do that while avoiding the type of trade that the enemy champion wants. You really have to play a lot to understand the matchups and understand what kind of trade each champion wants, which is why it's very important to have a small champ pool. But you really need to understand the trading patterns. But for some generals that are not champion specific, you really want to trade in your minions, and you want to avoid trading in the enemy minions, especially early on. Later on, this isn't as impactful, but early on, minions will do a lot of damage. You want to go for a trade when the enemy is going for farm, which is fairly intuitive. The enemy is going for farm. If you go for a trade, then they either have to choose, do they go for the farm, do they go for the trade, or maybe they'll get kind of confused and they'll just do neither, and then that's a really big win if you can get a trade on them and they don't get the farm. You also really want to know what allies and enemies are nearby. Maybe enemies are missing, they could be nearby. You probably don't want to go for an all-in trade if there might be an enemy mid. If there might be an enemy near you, you need to play a little bit safer just until they show back up, because what if they are there? You might lose the trade really bad. It's also very important to note that holding abilities is a lot stronger than it seems. What I mean by holding abilities is sometimes the threat of using an ability is better than actually using it on them. If I'm, for example, playing LeBlanc over here and I have the ability to either go for a trade or not go for a trade, sometimes it's better to not go for the trade. And what I mean by that is the threat of LeBlanc's chain can be enough that I can zone the enemy mid laner from farm. I can zone them from experience because they might not know if I could kill them. They might not know if my jungler's nearby, and if I land chain, I could kill them. In other words, holding abilities can be very, very useful in lane because it gives you the possibility of creating a lot of threat on the enemy and making them unsure of what your game plan is, and causes them to give you more respect. It's also important to position properly in the lane. You need to know when to posture aggressively, when to posture passively. Can you take a trade? Can you play in front of your minions? Do you stay behind your minions? Do you stay in your minions? Do you stay on the side of the lane near the bushes? Which side of the lane do you stay on? Which depends on where your jungler is, where you have your wards, where you have your vision, where the safe side of the lane is. You can also use your position to bluff. This is a lot better in higher elos when the enemy will really try to get inside your head and see what are you trying to do. But what I mean by bluffing is you can pretend and play like your jungler is there. You can kind of zone them off farm without actually having it to back you up. On the similar vein, you can kind of read the enemy's positioning to kind of figure out what they're trying to do. If they've been playing passive all lane and now out of nowhere they're starting to play pretty aggressive, you can kind of figure out, oh, I'm probably getting ganked. There's probably a reason that they're playing aggressive. It's also very important to know wave manipulation. And not only do you need to really understand freezes, how to do it, how to slow push the wave, how to build the wave and push it into the tower, you really need to understand when is it the best time to pull a freeze off? When is it best to do the slow push? When is it best to crash? And if you do crash the wave, what do? Do you harass them under tower, stop them from getting the farm while getting plates? Do you go bot and do a roam or go top? Do you invade the enemy jungler with your jungle? Do you go and get vision? What do you do when you get that? Do you get a tempo reset? When you have a freeze, you need to make sure that you really communicate with your jungler and say, hey, look, I'm going to freeze. Come mid if you want. We can get a free kill. It's also very important to understand the reset timings and know when is a good time to reset. And you should really plan this in advance. It's very important to reset on your big key item spikes. If you're playing Twisted Fate, go reset at when you have your Catalyst or when you have a Dark Seal and boots. If you're playing a Control Mates, reset on your 1300 gold. It's also important to understand resource designation. And what I mean by resource designation is who on the team is going to be getting the most help. This could be from jungler assistance. If you're playing mid lane and you are getting ganks from your jungler, if you've gotten 3 ganks before 10 minutes, understand that yes, you are probably winning because you've had the extra resources directed toward you. And if your bot and your top are losing and your jungler's down in farm because they've been putting all the resources on you, they aren't getting as many resources. So it makes sense that they're not going to be winning lane. And so if you are winning lane because you're getting extra resources toward you, don't flame your teammates for losing lane when you're getting the resources. This also could just go as far as to champion select. If you have last pick, you're getting counter pick, but you getting counter pick is a resource because it means that your top laner might not get counter pick. Now for some examples of how I dominated lane in my recent ranked games and how I translated that into lead. I have 4 on the side over here. So the first one up top, I was playing LeBlanc. I went 12-0 and 11. What I did in this game is I got early priority. I got vision out early, and I played around the Scuttle Crab. I used that, played with the jungler, and I played with the team, and I made sure I was at almost every single fight. I had a KP of 74%, which is very, very important to have on a mid laner, high KP every single game. The next game, what I did was I saw that the enemy Orianna was playing way too aggressive. I took advantage of that and I was able to blow her flash very early in the game. And then I used wave manipulation to freeze the wave right in front of my tower. And I just had my jungler come. And when the jungler wasn't there, I had the threat with my chain by not using it, by holding my ability to make it so that the enemy Orianna had no idea if my jungler was there or not. He just had to play really safe. And if he did go up, either I would take a really good trade on him or the jungler would come and we'd kill him. So I was able to deny a lot of farm and a lot of XP from that. The next game, again, I played around the jungler. I went to every single fight. I was at every skirmish before the enemy mid, and I missed some farm because of that. But I was able to make that back up by going into the side lane later on. But by getting my team ahead in these fights, that's how I won that game. And again, the next game I played Zed. I won my lane, and I farmed up a lot. I got 8 CS per minute. I didn't really join the fights this game because I thought my team was fairly ahead as well. I'm just going to go to the side lane because they have no one who can match me. And if they send 2 or 3 to me, I might be able to get a kill or 2 regardless. And my team will be able to get objectives in the form of dragons, in the form of towers, in the form of Baron. Now, for some of the things not to do in order to win lane. One of the biggest things I see a lot of lower elo people do is they die very often. Every time you die, you lose the potential of other resources. You lose the potential of farming. You lose the experience of the minions that die. You really can't afford to die 1v1 during the lane very often. And you can't really be dying to ganks very often. You really need to ward and understand when the enemy has kill threat and to play safe when they do. You also really need to understand power spikes and know when the enemies are missing. Whether that's your enemy mid laner missing, roaming to a side lane and let your teammates know, hey, Talon's roaming bot, Katarina's roaming bot, please back off or you die. Or know when the enemy support or ADC or top or jungle is missing and they might be coming to gank you. You also really need to know when you need to give up a wave or a kill. Maybe your wave's in a really horrible spot. You just got a kill on the enemy mid laner, but your wave is slow pushing, but the jungler might be missing. And if you go to push that in and crash it, you'll just die to the jungler and your wave is still screwed. It's also important not to overextend. You can play very far up, but you need to know that you have to have vision and you have to lean towards that vision. You have to play safe and calculated. You cannot go far up just for the sake of going far up, because if you do, you might die. If you're winning lane and you play far up without vision when the enemies are missing and you don't respect the enemy's crowd control and the enemy's threat, that's how you can die and give up a shutdown and throw your lead. You also really can't use your key abilities unless it's for a good reason. For example, if I'm playing Zed and I use my W, that's 20 plus seconds where I don't have any escape besides my flash. Where if I get ganked around that, I have to blow flash or I die. If you're using your escape for a trade, you have to know that the enemies are not going to be ganking you. You have to have the vision. You have to be in a spot where if you are getting ganked from the other side, that you'll still be able to get out. Also learn not to hard lose your lane. People lose lane. It happens. You need to learn how to play the weak side of the map. You need to lose lane gracefully. Understand, back to the previous slide, where if you're getting resources that make sense that your other laners are losing lane, understand that if you're not getting the resources, if your jungler's not ganking you, your other lanes should, in theory, be winning. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way, but if you're not getting the resources, if you're playing weak side of the map, if you're losing lane, if you lose it gracefully, you might be able to get carried, or you might be able to come back and get fed later on. It's also important to not throw your leads. You really need to play calculated and play around your winning lanes. If you go and you gank losing lanes and you go roam to losing lanes and you aren't strong enough to deal with them, you might throw your lead and make it so that the enemy really becomes unstoppable. And that is you personally throwing the game because your team designated you as the carry and you threw it. Here is one game that I won because I let my team carry me. I was playing LeBlanc into Galio, which is a horrible matchup, and the enemy jungler was duo with the mid laner as well. They camped me, and I was 0-4 in the laning phase, and I decided to just give up farm. I would not overextend. I would make sure that the Galio could not roam, and my bot lane and my top lane both got very fed because the jungler spent all of his time mid. So their lead wasn't getting extended to the side lanes, and their lead wasn't getting any further. By me not dying anymore, I let my team carry me. Now for this next game, I was 18-8, and I was the only one on my team really fed. I was definitely able to carry this game, but I died too often. I had 8 deaths. If I didn't die so often in the side lane, if I had better vision, if I ducked out of the vision, if I played back and safer, we definitely might have been able to win that game. Again, this next Talon game, I only had 4 deaths. However, sometimes that's all it takes. I had 1 death before the dragon fight, and it was enough for the enemy team to snowball and win the game off of it. If I didn't die before that dragon fight, it's very likely we would have won that game. And again, the next game, I was 7-4-0. I was the one carrying our team. However, I started to play towards the losing lane and I gave the shutdown. Like I said previously, towards playing around the winning lanes. Since I was the fed one and I died to their fed one, we lose the game. I stopped farming. I'm the one who threw the game. Yes, I was the one who was carrying and I was playing the best on my team. However, they gave me the resources, and in my opinion, it's my fault I threw the game. My teammates could have played better, but it's my fault I didn't carry the lead properly. In order to climb, it's also really important to have good rotations. One thing that really helped me was to really anticipate skirmishes. If you look around the map, you can kind of get an understanding of, oh, there's going to be a fight here in 30 seconds. Scuttle spawns soon. I'm going to probably want to be there before the fight. Their Leona's playing really aggressive. There's probably going to be a fight soon. So I should really posture and be ready to go there as soon as I think it's going to happen. You really also want to join fights early and play with and around your team. You want to figure out what your teammates are doing and do what they want to do, assuming what they're doing is the correct macro decision. You also really need to understand not all fights are good fights. If you think a fight's just a horrible fight, just leave. Honestly, just leave. Don't die as well. Don't give them an extra kill. Don't give them the shutdown. Don't give them the gold. It's also important to know what your jungler's doing, especially in mid lane. You want to protect that jungler. You want to go invade with him, and if he's getting invaded, you want to be there too. You can't always go because sometimes you don't have priority or you'll be late or you can't, but you need to communicate that as well, like the next point. You need to communicate priority early. Can you rotate? Let your jungler know, hey, I'll be able to be there for that scuttle fight. Let the jungler know, hey, this is my lane state. This also gives them the opportunity for letting them know, hey, I have the lane frozen. We have an opportunity to dive coming up. Communication lets you help the jungler and lets the jungler help you. Using your F keys is very important. If you don't know, your F keys allow you to get the perspective of your teammates. For example, if your jungler is right here on the minimap, and if you're just looking at the minimap, you could just see him walking around like this. If you press your F key and you watch him, you could see, oh, he's going to get vision. Oh, he's half health. He's probably looking to try to take the enemy camps. He might be trying to loop around here for a gank. But you might not know that unless you press the F key and really see what he's doing. If you use your F keys bot lane, you can see, oh yeah, they've been heavy trading. The minions are pushing towards my ally's tower. We might be able to come and get a counter gank. We might be able to get a gank going. You can really see and anticipate what's going to happen by using your F keys to understand what's happening with your teammates' game. Additionally, objectives are probably the most important thing in this game. You really need to be ready for objectives. Understand that being there right as it spawns isn't enough. It takes 25 to 30 seconds to get to Dragon or Herald from base. You need to play around your item spikes and resource advantages. You don't want to go for a Dragon right before you get your Trinity Force. You want to wait, have that fight till after you get that buy-in. You don't want to be fighting for an objective when you don't have much health. You want to go for it after you get a chunk on the enemy because they're at the disadvantage. What I mean by taking trades around objectives is that when objectives are up, you have to be a little more careful with the trades you take in lane, because if you get chunked too heavily, that means you need to back and they can get a free objective. If there's no purpose to your trade other than to maybe hopefully get a bit of damage on the enemy, you probably don't want to take that trade because it's too risky. You also really need to know when your jungler tries and is trying to get objectives. You need to understand that when your jungler is going for an early dragon, if you can, try to get priority mid. Try to push the enemy mid laner in so they can't roam. So that way, if something goes awry, if your jungler needs help, you can get there and give your team the advantage. Also, it's important not to give objectives for free. If the enemies are going for dragon, go for Herald. Always try to trade for something, even if it's something small. If the enemy is going for dragon, maybe you can take their chickens, maybe you can take their golems, maybe you can take something from them. Maybe you can get a tower on the other side of the map, go gank top and get a kill, get some plates. But you also need to know when you aren't in the position to trade for something. Sometimes you can't, and that's okay. Sometimes you have to wait until they make a mistake that you can capitalize on rather than actually trying to go for objective. Also, scuttles aren't really an objective, but I definitely view them as an objective because early scuttle fights can often lead to the outcome of the game in the laning phase. Junglers often tunnel and go for the scuttles no matter what and will try to fight the enemy jungler for no reason. If you can be there to back them up, that will often be the difference between a win and a loss in the game. It won't always help, but sometimes it will. You need to know if you can contest. Let your jungler know, I won't be able to be there, you should give, and just try to get the other one. You also really need to communicate objective control with your team. Let them know, hey, dragon spawning soon. Let's go get these towers. Do not fight. I'm going to go solo dragon. I'm going to go push for bot tower. Just play safe. You also really need vision control around the objectives. That way you can get the picks. You can kill the enemies and get the free objectives. And by the same token, don't make risky plays before objectives. If you end up dying, that could be the throw. Similar to this slide here where I died before that dragon. That one death, that one throw was the reason that we lost the game because I made a risky play before an objective. What I mean by side lane awareness is which side lane is best for you to go. Is it best for you to go bot? Is it best for you to go mid? Is it best for you to go top? Who should you match? Do you match their top laner? Do you match their mid laner? Do you try to match their ADC? The main purpose of going to the side lane is to collect extra minion waves. This is how you keep your CS per minute up. It's also to push and get towers and objectives, and to create man advantages as well. One of the most important things to know is how far can you push the lane? If you are behind, you probably don't want to push further than this tower. Even if your tier 2 tower is up, the enemies can easily go through here and orchestrate a dive on you and kill you if it's past 15 minutes. If you're ahead, you can probably go a lot further up. But again, you want to have vision here or here or here. You really need to know in advance if the enemies are going to be collapsing on you and being able to kill you. So that way, if they are, you have time to get out of there without dying. Or if you are able to commit them to a fight, your team can go pressure Baron. Your team can pressure these few towers, maybe an inhibitor. You want to make sure you're pushing up when your team is pressuring the rest of the map. If you're bot lane pushing up far, but your team is clearing your jungle, that is a horrible idea because their team is just going to see you alone. And if you die, your team won't be able to get anything from your death. They'll just be clearing their camps. It's also important to know when to group versus when to side lane. If your team has been fighting really aggressive, their team has a lot of engage, you might not want to side lane very far. You don't really want to be going this far up because you just want to push the wave in so it's pushing towards them and then group. So that way you can collect the minion waves, stay up in your CS, but then group so that way you're still there at the fights. You really also have to see what objectives are up. If Baron is up or Dragon is up, you want to be ready to group a lot more frequently. If nothing is up, there are no objectives, it's okay to side lane a little bit more, especially because if you end up getting caught, you really don't lose much because there's nothing for the enemy team to get if you die. Also, whoever has teleport is really important. The one who has teleport should be on the opposite side of the map to the major objective. What I mean by this is that if Dragon is about to spawn and the top laner is here, he is able to teleport to the Dragon fight. But if you are here and the fight starts to break out, you have to walk all the way across here and you'll be late to the fight and your team will likely lose. And now for factors that are outside of the game. Before the game, in the lobby, you really want to have a small champ pool. I've played a lot of games with a lot of champions and I found my main champ pool to be LeBlanc and Zed mid with Kha'Zix jungle. That is what I enjoy and that is what I have the most success on. You also want to analyze the win cons, the matchups, and your game plan, as well as the enemy's game plan. What I mean by this is during the loading screen, you kind of want to see who has the potential of carrying on both teams. Who on your team has a winning and losing matchup? What should your game plan be in order to win this game? Who should you help out? Should you be freezing a lot and trying to get your jungler to gank for you? Should you be getting priority and invading the enemy jungle? You also really need to know when to dodge. If your teammates seem really tilted, if you have people first timing champions and off rolls, it might be a good idea to dodge. Any game's really winnable. dodging isn't as important, but there are still definitely games where you need to dodge. In terms of when to play, remember that quality is always more important than quantity. It's more important to play good games where you're playing well, where you're on top of the mark, where you're going to be doing very well, than a lot of games. Because if you're just playing a lot of games but you're not playing that well, you might climb a little bit, but you won't climb nearly as much as if you play good games. You don't want to queue up when you're tilted. That is how these loss streaks happen. You need to wait a little bit, wait 5, 10, 15 minutes, maybe till the next day, maybe 5 days. However long it takes for you to no longer be tilted, relax a little, and then queue up. Win and loss streaks will happen. It's part of the game. Play around that and understand and don't get tilted from it. Having a schedule can help some people play better. Maybe you play best in the morning. Maybe you play best at night. Whatever works best for you, try to keep that in mind and play when you play best. I have also noticed that it really helps me to take small breaks between games. Whether that's just to go to the bathroom or to get tea or go for a walk. Taking small breaks between games helps me focus on the game I'm about to play rather than the one that I just played. This could also be a small break from League, a few days off. I cannot overstate this last point enough. You need to try to learn from every game. Every single game, there's something for you to learn, whether that's your matchup, whether that's your trading patterns, your combos, something else. You can learn from every game. And limit testing is also another controversial one for me because a lot of people just say, oh yeah, I was limit testing, that's why I die. But sometimes people don't actually use it to learn. Limit testing is good when you do it properly. Limit testing is when you really want to test what your champion can do. In order to actually be limit testing, you need to be able to take the knowledge from what you did and be able to apply it to a future situation. How much damage can you do to the enemy here? Are you able to solo dragon here? Are you able to make this roam? Are you able to land your abilities consistently? Okay, for a summary of the key points that I think you really need to focus on, you need to play to learn. That's the most important thing. Every game you need to try to learn how to become better. It is hard to focus on improving in a lot of areas at the same time. I recommend really only focusing on 1 or 2 at the same time. For example, for 10 games you might really focus on your trading patterns and your farming. And then the next 10 games you focus on your map awareness and your side laning. The next is to have a small champ pool. It's really important to be able to focus on the macro instead of focusing on how to pull off this combo. Instead of trying to figure out, oh, do I have enough damage to kill them there? Instead of focusing on the tethering range. You can focus on your mini-map. You can focus on your game plan. You can really focus on the macro instead of focusing on the small micro decisions. It's also important to make a game plan every single game and to constantly evaluate during the game. You need to understand, is your game plan changing? What are your win cons? You need to constantly throughout the game try to figure out what can I do to win this game. It's also important to note, have a positive mental. Try not to tilt. Tilt will happen. Try to play around it. Try to be positive to your teammates and understand if you're getting resources, they are not getting resources. Try to understand maybe they're just having a bad game and there's not much you can do about that. Sometimes you just lose games. Also understand that every game matters. Try to win every single game. Quality over quantity. Try to play every game as well as you possibly can. Also, I cannot understate the importance of communication with your team. Communicate with your jungler, especially. Let him know priority. Try to be there with him. Try to understand what your jungler and your side lanes are trying to do and what they're trying to accomplish. Whether they're trying to invade, whether they're trying to set up a freeze, whether or not you can gank them. Try to communicate if your jungler or your support or someone can come help gank you. It's also important to understand your teammates and your enemy's goals. Remember, try to figure out what your teammates are trying to do and help them achieve that. Try to figure out what your enemies are trying to do. Is your enemy trying to set up a freeze on you? Maybe you try to push the lane faster so that way they can't thin the wave. Again, always be early to fights and to objectives. Even if the enemies are ahead, if you can be there before the enemy mid, you might be able to win a fight because of that. You might be able to get a pick because you're at the objective early. Try to be early and that will really help you win more games. And lastly, try to make guaranteed plays. Don't take so many risks. Yes, risky plays can be fun and they might work out, but if you can make calculated plays that you know are going to work, if you can take a trade that you get 10% of the enemy's health, but you take no damage in return, that is an amazing trade. You do not want to take a risky play, especially around objectives, but if you make risky plays, that means you die more. That means you lose more farm. That means you take worse trades, and all of those lead towards advantages to the enemy team. They can work out for you, but very often they do not, and that can lead to more losses. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate all of your support. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them down in the comments below. I will try to answer everything as thoroughly as possible. Thank you so much, and good luck climbing.